Hello and welcome to the NASCAR News Zone, the show where we take you through all the biggest stories in the world of stock car racing right now. The 2025 Cup Series season is all ready to get underway this weekend, so let's have a look at the biggest stories in the build-up to the Daytona 500. This week we react to NASCAR's controversial world-class driver rule, as well as qualifying and the duels to set the grid for the 2025 edition of the Great American Race. Let's dive in. The NASCAR season hasn't even started yet, but there's already some big controversies about this season. There's some new rules in 2025 that have very much rubbed up some drivers and some fans the wrong way, while some actually support these changes. I'm going to go over what exactly is going on here by reading out this article that I've written on the motorsportreports.com. But after that, I'm going to give my personal thoughts on this as well, go over the pros and cons, and there's some of that, of course, in this article too. But let's have a look at why some people are not too happy about this full article on motorsportreports.com. A new and controversial NASCAR rule designed for world-class drivers has the potential to grant Helio Castroneves an automatic entry into the Daytona 500. If the four-time Indy 500 winner utilizes this provision, it would result in the largest field for the race in a decade. The complex rule, which was introduced in the charter agreement signed by the 13 teams last September, is simply to a promoter's provisional and allows NASCAR to designate one driver as a guaranteed 41st entry. Three-time Daytona 500 winner Denny Hamlin expressed his disapproval of the rule, stating it reeks of desperation by NASCAR, calling it nothing but a gimmick to attract the big stars to stock car racing. Others questioned why the provisional was given to Castroneves, a 49-year-old making his NASCAR debut, instead of 7-time NASCAR champion and 2-time Daytona winner Jimmie Johnson. The rule is intended for drivers who do not currently race full-time in NASCAR, making Johnson and 2017 Cup Series champion Martin Truex Jr. eligible for consideration. However, their teams did not submit a request, which must be done 90 days before the event. Trackhouse Racing was the only team to request the provisional for Castroneves, who enters Wednesday's qualifying as the sole driver eligible for the 41st spot. Let's see what some of these guys are thinking. Alex Bowman has commented on it, saying that I think Jimmie Johnson is a world-class driver, but I guess other people don't. It's an interesting rule for sure. There's a lot of hype and importance to the sport to have people like Castroneves that come in. If they miss the race, then it kind of hurts the whole thing. So I get it, but I also wish some of our past champions were respected in the same way in some sense. Castroneves will only use the provisional if he fails to claim one of the 4 open spots through traditional qualifying in what was originally intended to be a 40-car field. If he uses it, the 41 cars will be the most in the Daytona 500 since 2015, when 43 cars were still the standard. It's important to note that if Castroneves uses the provisional, Trackhouse and Castroneves will not receive any points or payouts, and all drivers who finish behind him will be moved up one position in the standings, and that just makes things complicated, doesn't it? The rule has divided the field, despite the fact he will likely only come into play at Daytona International Speedway, where the 9 drivers are competing for the 4 spots. NASCAR's charter system guarantees entry to 36 cars in every race. Tyler Reddick shared his perspective on the matter, saying, aside from the Daytona 500, we don't get in a spot very often where drivers of that caliber are going home. I don't know where to fall on this. On the one hand, I would hate for a guy like Lewis Hamilton to come over here and attempt to start the 500 and something keeps him from running the race. We also don't want to just let them have a spot in the race, like they have to earn it. In the event that NASCAR receives multiple requests for the provisional, the organization will decide the designated world-class driver ahead of the event. The criteria listed in the charter for the rule states, if the open exemption position is intended for a driver who will significantly impact the promotion of the event and grow the prominence of the sport. They're being honest about it, at least with that quote, aren't they? That is what it is. I think it is a money thing at the end of the day. And what did I say? I saw that there was a record gate already. The sales for the Daytona 500 was in the many millions of dollars. It's a massive event, is the 500. This won't happen every week, and this won't be happening for New Hampshire or something like that. This is something that's only really going to come into play with the really big races like the Daytona 500, the Coke 600 maybe, Talladega, stuff like that. But it's a controversial issue for sure. John Prost, NASCAR senior Senior Vice President of Racing Development, addressed the hypothetical scenario during a competition briefing last month. When asked what NASCAR would do if 7-time Formula One champion Lewis Hamilton, 4-time champion Max Verstappen, and 6-time IndyCar champion Scott Dixon and NASCAR Hall of Famer Jimmy Johnson all submitted a request to the same race, Prost responded, "I'd love to have that problem." Didn't answer the question though, did he? That's a tough one. NASCAR could face this dilemma later this year when the series visits Mexico City, as several teams are exploring deals to enter Juan Pablo Montoya into the race. Of course, the Colombian is a rather famous driver and an ex-NASCAR driver too. Watkins Glen last season as well, I believe. Additionally, the inaugural street race in Chicago saw Shane Van Gisbergen, who won the event and subsequently left his Australian V8 Supercars career behind for NASCAR, demonstrating the potential for an unexpected entry. In recent years, former F1 drivers have made appearances in NASCAR races. The 2025 Indianapolis race featured Jenson Button and Kamui Kobayashi, while Button and Kimi Raikkonen, both F1 champions, competed in the same field at the Circuit of the Americas. Chase Elliott expressed his mixed feelings on the matter, saying, "I can argue both sides of the fence. You'd hate to have Castro Neves, Verstappen, Hamilton, or someone come into a race and miss the show due to something silly. So I can certainly see that aspect from it promoter-wise. But I also think with this prestigious race, there should be some sort of integrity of making the show. I think that's part of what makes the race prestigious. You know, it's hard in a hard event to make. If you see that with the Indy 500 or you see that at the Chili Bowl, right? It's a hard race to make. It's a big deal to get into the show. I just don't want to ever degrade or hurt the long-term integrity of the sport and take the prestige out of events that should be some of our biggest days of the year." So yeah, it's complicated, and like a lot of drivers there do sum up very well, it's a controversial issue in the sense that there is no right or wrong answer here. You could even go so far as to say, well, for all races there should not be chartered entries. You should have to qualify on merit for the event, like the Indy 500, I think, although no, them as well. I do apologize for that. Yeah, so I mean, and that system in IndyCar, for example, has meant that the likes of Fernando Alonso, even though he's a double world champion, didn't start one of the years because McLaren's absolutely messed up their program, and that's the risk that you take being a non-chartered entry. So you could argue that as well. You could say, well, chartered entry should not be guaranteed entry, or not have chartered teams and stuff like that in NASCAR. You could go as far as to say that. But in the situation we are in, it's tough because I understand it from the money point of view. There will be people there that go from Brazil. There'll be some that want to see Castro Neves do, because Castro Neves is Brazilian. They'll want to see him do, and there'll be IndyCar fans as well. It's like, I want to see Castro Neves on his debut. And then to be sent home is a pretty bitter pill to swallow. It's like in England, when it's bad weather and football matches get postponed. It's part and parcel of the game, but that doesn't mean that it's a good thing. It's kind of messing things up for people. So I am really on the fence of it. I do understand why they're doing it. My question would be, to be honest, why are we on 40 cars now in NASCAR? Why can't we just go for 43 like we used to back in my day? NASCAR Chronicle remembers those days. So it's a whole can of worms, and I feel like the drivers are hitting the nails on the head when it comes to the opinions about this. But I want to get your opinion as well, guys. What do you think about this? Should the system change? Should Castro Neves not be assured qualifying? Should it be Castro Neves that is assured of qualifying for the event? Because, yeah, like they say, Truex Jr., former champion, Johnson, 7-time champion, and what they were saying about Jimmy Johnson being a world-class driver, he was a world-class driver. I don't think he's on that level anymore. If anybody who saw him in 2024 when he did enter, he was just making up the numbers basically. And don't get me wrong, and that's not me insulting Johnson, because I mean, when I first started watching NASCAR, he was the guy. I've always said he was the Michael Schumacher of NASCAR. The guy was unbelievable. He won 5 championships in a row, I think, didn't he? The guy was world class. Absolutely, one of the greats, one of the GOATs, undeniably. But he's not on that level anymore. So then you think, well, he should have to qualify for it. But I feel, again, be honest, right? I know Castro Neves is in his first NASCAR race, but who's going to have more fans at the event? Are there going to be more people supporting Johnson or Castro Neves? I would bet quite a bit of my money and say that it would be Johnson. The fan base that the guy has had over the decades, he must be, surely. It has to be, surely. So, yeah, I can see both arguments for and against. I want to hear what you have to say there. So the Daytona 500 is on this weekend, the first race that is competitive for the actual championship of the NASCAR Cup Series season in 2025. After being at the Madhouse, now we head to the lottery, as I call it. Anybody can win this race. It's such an incredible event to behold. The Great American Race, as we hear it so often, of course. But for the first time in 2025, let's have a look at the 5 drivers that I'm looking forward to seeing the most during this race. So, first of all, let's start with the most successful driver on the grid in terms of overall wins at the Daytona 500, and that is, of course, Denny Hamlin. Hamlin is someone who I'm looking forward to seeing this weekend. He's been very vocal in his kind of opposition to the world-class driver rule, as it were. Now, it's been a little while since he last won the 500. His last victory coming in 2020, of course. At the end of the day, he's still, in my opinion, a driver that should definitely be in the playoffs this season. That should be his ambitions. I see no reason why he can't do this. And this is, of course, one of his best tracks of all time as well. So we'll see how Hamlin gets on, of course, during this season's race. But let's move now to a driver who is a rookie, a complete rookie in NASCAR, but he is assured of a place in the 500 because of the aforementioned world-class driver rule. He is an OEM, I believe the term is, and that is Helio Castroneves. At the young age of 49, he's making his NASCAR Cup Series debut this weekend. He is assured of a place on the grid. He is not driving for a chartered team, but come what may, in the qualifying and also the qualifying race as well, the Duels as they are called, he will be on the grid no matter what. Now, that might be as the 41st driver or the 40th driver or anywhere up to 37th effectively in terms of actually his qualifying. But at the end of the day, he is a fantastic driver. He is someone who has won the Indy 500, I believe, more times than anybody else. I think 4 victories overall, which is just incredible, really. Trying his hand at NASCAR, it's a great look for the series, really. Whether you agree with the world-class driver rule or not, it's great to have a driver like Helio in the race. But somebody that we may not see during this race, but I'm going to highlight them anyway just in case we do see them, is Jimmie Johnson. Now, Jimmie Johnson, of course, is a legend of the sport, and a lot of people think that really he should have been given the world-class driver entry rather than Helio Castroneves. That is a debate for a different video. I've already spoken about that new rule, of course, in a separate video here on the NASCARchronicle.com. Johnson has won here twice previously, in 2006 and 2013. These days, of course, he's only a part-time driver. He's more involved as a part owner of the team, of course, as well these days. He is not assured of a place on the grid, but let's see how he gets on because there are 4 spots up for grabs, but he will have to compete with the likes of Castroneves and also Martin Truex Jr., a former champion as well in his own right too. I hope Johnson does make the start. It'd be a bit bad if he doesn't do it personally. It'd be kind of sad to really see him try and qualify for an event and doesn't quite manage it, but I think he'll be on the grid for what it's worth. I think he'll get one of those 4 spots come what may, to be perfectly honest, but we'll see how he gets on this weekend. Someone else who is relatively inexperienced in NASCAR terms is, well, I'm not saying Johnson's inexperienced in NASCAR terms, that's more a reference to Castroneves before anybody calls me out on that, is Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG is competing in his first full-time season of NASCAR racing and his first Daytona 500 as well. Of course, last season he did compete in the Coke Zero 400, which also takes place at Daytona, but that is the summer/autumn race of this track's kind of participation in the NASCAR calendar. You know, SVG is a lot better around road courses and street tracks, of course, we know this, but it's going to be great to see how he can kind of hang with the fast runners around this race, and with all the stages and all the pit stops and everything, the strategy is going to be fascinating. I'm really looking forward to seeing how SVG gets on in his first ever Daytona 500. And the last guy I'm going to highlight, someone who has never won the Daytona 500 before, but that is not through lack of trying. Someone who I would say is the favourite for the championship this year. It's not the defending champion Joey Logano, no, it is Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson, for me, overall throughout the season, was probably the best driver in the NASCAR Cup Series season in 2024. Like I said, he's never won the 500. I don't believe he's ever won around this track. He might have won the Coke Zero 400 at some point, but I know he's definitely not won the Daytona 500. And you know, for a great driver like him in NASCAR, it'd be so good for him to tick off the Great American Race, the race that is the biggest one on the NASCAR calendar. And of course, the first race of 2025, and a victory would see him through to the playoffs pretty much, come what may in the remainder of the season. Win and you're in. So let's see if he manages to do it. But yeah, those are 5 of the drivers that I'm looking forward to seeing the most this weekend in the Daytona 500. Who is yours, guys? Let us know in the comments below. I'm just so glad that NASCAR is back for the first competitive race of 2025. If what we saw at the Madhouse is anything to go by, it's going to be an excellent season, a very competitive season, and a season that is filled with drama, no doubt as well. So, qualifying for the Daytona 500, the front row at least has been completed. Of course, the Daytona 500 has a unique way of sorting out qualifying. There's the dual races and stuff like that going on as well, but the front row has been decided. Now, if you want a more in-depth look at how the qualifying system works for the Daytona 500, of course, I've already done a video for that on the NASCARchronicle.com, so do go check that out if you've not already. But let's have a look at what's been happening here, because Chase Briscoe and Austin Cindric are on the front row for the Daytona 500. Full article here on the NASCARchronicle.com. In a stunning turn of events during Wednesday night's qualifying session for the 67th running of the Daytona 500, Chase Briscoe upset Ford's dominance to claim pole position for NASCAR's most prestigious race. Briscoe completed a lap in 49.249 seconds, an average speed of 182.745 miles per hour, to secure the top starting spot for Sunday's race, which is of course 2:30 p.m. local time on Sunday. This achievement marks the first time that a Toyota driver has won pole position for the Great American Race ever. Briscoe narrowly edged out 2022 Daytona 500 Austin Cindric by a mere 0.076 seconds to claim prime position on the grid, or pole position for most of us in the motorsport world. Briscoe said that it was a great way to start our season and celebrated his 3rd overall career pole in the NASCAR Cup Series. He said it was an unbelievable way to start off the year, unbelievable way to start off with Toyota, to be able to be the guy to deliver them their first anything when they've already been accomplished in so many other areas is pretty cool. You can say that again. I can't thank Coach Gibbs enough, the entire Joe Gibbs Racing organization, the whole off season. Everybody kept telling me the focus was to try and qualify at the super speedways. That is something I really struggled with last year. For our 19 group to come here and sit on pole is the biggest race of the year, is something pretty special. Again, you can definitely say that again. Due to the unique qualifying format for the 500, only Briscoe in his first season with Joe Gibbs Racing and Cindric have their starting positions locked in for Sunday's race. Just very briefly, the way it works is that now there'll be a dual qualifying race. All the chartered guys, they are all guaranteed somewhere between 1st and all the way down to 40th. There could be 41 runners if, of course, Castro Neves does not qualify automatically, and the other 4 spots will be decided by the guys who are non-chartered entries, so people like Truex and Johnson, of course, as well. So they'll be all fighting it out for that. It's quite complicated, but yeah, that's kind of the quickest rundown I can do with that. 4 drivers dominated the top 5 positions in qualifying, with Cindric, Ryan Preece, reigning NASCAR Cup Series champion Joey Logano, and Josh Berry, good to see Berry up there, occupying 2nd through to 5th on the speed charts respectively. A lot of fast Fords, Cindric commented. Pretty good start on the front row with one of my good friends. All in all, a great box checked for the start to the week. I think every single part of this weekend is important to set up an opportunity to win this race on Sunday. The remaining starting order will be determined through Thursday night's duel at the Daytona 150 mile an hour. It'll be faster than that. 150 mile qualifying races. However, Truex Jr. and Jimmy Johnson have already secured their spots in the field. There we go. After posting the 2 fastest qualifying times through the 9 of the uncharted drivers. So Truex and Johnson are going to be in. There's 2 more spots there, potentially 3 if Castro Neves is not one of them. And if you're wondering why Castro Neves will get in no matter what, it's because he is the world-class driver that has been designated for this race. A very controversial new rule in NASCAR, of course. But yeah, there we go, guys. Good to see Truex and Johnson, of course, on the grid. 2 former champions and one of the all-time greats, of course, in the form of Johnson too. And yeah, the weekend is just getting started. The qualifying duel races, we'll cover them too on the NASCAR Chronicle doc. So the Daytona duels have very much delivered a lot of drama. So for those that don't know, the qualifying for the Daytona 500, the Great American Race, is a unique one in the NASCAR Cup Series. It's not just a standard qualifying session. You've got a qualifying session that initially sets the top 2 for the grid, as well as a duel as well, a qualifying race, if you will. I believe it's 150 miles, something like that. The article will, of course, tell me. I did write this article, but I got a memory of a sieve at the best of times, of course, guys. You already knew that, though, of course. But yeah, got the results of this. Let's head into this article here on the motorsportreports.com and go over what it means for this weekend's event. In a thrilling display of teamwork and determination, Bubba Wallace, with a push from teammate Tyler Reddick, surged ahead of Daytona 500 2024 winner William Byron to win on Thursday night's first duel at Daytona 150-mile qualifying race. The victory earned Wallace the 3rd starting position for Sunday's 67th running of the Great American Race, which will take place at 2:30 or 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. Driving the number 23 XI Racing Toyota, Wallace edged Byron by a mere 0.082 seconds, while intense drama unfolded behind the two frontrunners. Justin Allgaier, with a determined charge over the final 2 laps, finished highest among the uncharted cars in the first duel, ensuring that a JR Motorsports Chevrolet would compete in a NASCAR Cup Series race for the first time in company history. Well done to them. Thanks to Tyler, Wallace said after the first duel, that was awesome to see 2 cars work together that well and learn a lot for Sunday. Did a great job of pushing me. Our McDonald's Toyota Camry was really fast. 2 different balances from being in the pack, being out front. Have some work to do from there. I've wanted one of these duels wins for so long. All my buddies got one. Tyler got one last year. I was not very happy about this. I got one now. I'm good. He didn't say that, but you can see what he said. I can't do anything like cursing on here. This is a traditional Christian channel here on the NASCAR Chronicle.com. In the second duel, sitter Austin Cindric narrowly edged Eric Jones for the victory. Cindric is doing amazingly well so far. He got 2nd overall in qualifying too at the day prior. Though Jones was first to the finish line, Cindric held a lead by inches when the caution lights illuminated as the car approached the stripe. Corey LaJoie driving the uncharted number 1 Rick Ware Racing Ford. Now that is a mouthful. Rick Ware Racing Ford, there we go, raced his way on into the Daytona 500 with a 6th place finish. Hey, say what you want about LaJoie, that's impressive. That's not bad at all. Allgaier's impressive performance in the duel earned him the 17th starting position in Sunday's race. This means a lot to our team, this little team of JR Motorsport, Allgaier said. Dale Jr. is an amazing race driver. He's an amazing dad, car owner. You can tell how much he wanted this, and our whole shop wanted this. Team co-owner and 2-time Daytona 500 winner Dale Earnhardt Jr. couldn't hide his elation at making the race for the first time as a car owner. This was rough emotionally, but damn, it worked out, he said. A wild multi-car wreck on the 14th lap eliminated the uncharted cars of Chandler Smith and Elio Castro Neves in the first duel. Castro Neves, who will start Sunday's race on an open exemption provision, expressed his disappointment but remained optimistic, so he will be the 41st starter on Sunday. It's disappointing because the number 91 Wendy's Chevrolet was really good. The boys on the Project 91 team did an amazing job. They have a little bit of work to do, unfortunately, but it wasn't the night we wanted. We'll take the provisional. So many people have been talking about it, but we'll take it and we'll learn more for all the race. Cindric had to wait until NASCAR reviewed the finish and confirmed him as the winner of the second duel. I honestly thought I got him, but I wasn't going to sit there and argue about anything Cindric said. But yeah, it's awesome. Glad to be putting on a great show for the fans here. LaJoie, who is without a full-time ride for 2025, underscored the significance of the Great American Race. You forget how special this race is right until you have to race for it, when you have to earn it, because when you're racing full-time, it's just one of the first 36, but when it's the one that you think about for months, it means that much more. The open cars of Anthony Alfredo and BJ McLeod failed to make the 500 field. Post-race inspection was completed without issue, confirming Bubba Wallace and Austin Cindric as the the dual winners, as well as Justin Allgaier and LaJoie locking into the Daytona 500. All right, so the Daytona 500 is on this weekend. Let's have a look at the most successful drivers in NASCAR Cup Series history at this event, the most prestigious event on the NASCAR calendar. Last season, you may remember here on the NASCARchronicle.com, I went over the most successful drivers at Daytona as a whole. Of course, Daytona does host more than one NASCAR Cup Series event every single year, but let's have a look at the drivers who make the Great American Race their true home. Here are the most successful drivers in the history of the event. Now, the only driver on here that is on the current grid is Denny Hamlin. He's managed 3 wins in his career so far around the Daytona 500. He's not managed it since 2020, but he did win it in back-to-back years between 2019 and 2020 as well. He also won his first 500 in 2016. Can he join the top 2 currently who are on 4 wins or higher in the Daytona 500 this weekend? Well, it's going to be a big ask for him, but stranger things have happened, of course. We'll go next to a bit of a legend of NASCAR, to say the least. Jeff Gordon, he also won the Daytona 500 on 3 occasions during his career. He won it in 1997, 1999, and also in 2005 as well. Going just a little bit further back, we get Dale Jarrett, who won on 3 occasions as well. He did so in 93, 96, and the year 2000 as well. And the last of the guys that have won 3 times around this track, we head a lot further back to Bobby Allison, who I think when he won his final one, he was about 50 years of age. Indeed, he was. I think he's the oldest NASCAR winner of all time, or certainly in the Daytona 500. He won his final one in 1988, but he also won relatively old at 40 years of age when he won his first one in 1978 as well, and he also won in 1982 as well. But let's get on to the top 2, the standouts, the people who have won it 4 times or more, and the guy who's won it 4 times in the past is Cale Yarborough. He had a massive gap between his first and his last one, 16 years between his win in 1968 and his final one in the 500 in 1984. He also won it back-to-back in those final 2 years as well, because he won it in 83 as well. In addition, he also won kind of in the middle of those in 1977 as well, winning in 3 decades. That is something that our top driver, the king of this category, some may say, has also managed, winning in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's Richard Petty. Of course, Richard Petty is top. I think he's had 10 wins at this event overall. Sorry, at this track, I should say, in NASCAR Cup Series events, which is just ridiculous when you think about it. But 7 of those came in the 500. He won for the first time in 1964 and also won in 66 as well. Furthermore, he won 4 times in the 1970s, winning in 71, 73, and 74. Back-to-back in those years, as well as 1979. His final victory at the Daytona 500 came in 1981 as well. Again, a big gap between his first and his last there, 17 years, which is just unbelievable. I mean, they call him the king for a reason at the end of the day. But yes, those are the most successful drivers in the history of the Daytona 500. Jimmy Johnson can, in theory, join these guys, of course, as a 3-time winner this weekend. He has qualified for the Daytona 500 as a non-chartered entry as I record this. He's won this event back in 2006 and 2013 as well, but if I'm being totally honest, the likelihood of Johnson winning this event is very, very low. He's only a part-time driver these days, and I think he's approaching 50 years of age now as well. Actually, he's getting on a bit. Yeah, he's 49 years old is Johnson. So, but hey, Bobby Allison won it at 50, so it's possible. Stranger things have happened. But yeah, there we go, guys. Who was your favorite driver from the history of the Daytona 500? Who was the driver you think is going to win this weekend as well? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for much more content on the world of NASCAR stock car racing, keep it tuned here to the NASCARchronicle.com. Have a great weekend, guys. Let's enjoy this race, the season opener for the Cup Series in 2025. Have a great one. See you very soon.